Cookies, yet again. In case that's what you're having for lunch, by the way, as well. It's just going to be a full plate of cookies. Anyway, here we are to talk about more of sort of the implications and approaches to handling the cookieless future. Although I think, as Alex, who we'll introduce shortly, just told me backstage, it's less about sort of the deprecation of the cookies and more about the issues that will surface. And I think that's one of the things that we're going to talk about in this panel with my two guests. So maybe could we start, Melinda and Alex, tell us a little bit about who you are and what your respective companies do. Melinda.
Yeah, so I'm Melinda Williams. I'm the Chief Data Scientist at Distillery. And Distillery is an ad targeting company. We have a long history in cookie-based targeting. I've had this job for 10 years, and I still have to go eat cookies like every time we have one of these conversations. But obviously now a big focus for us is targeting without cookies and actually targeting without IDs at all, which we call ID-free targeting. And I'm sure that's part of what will come up today.
Excellent.
My name is Alexander Potts. I oversee programmatic digital investment and ad technology at Tombras, which is one of the biggest independent agencies in North America. And our focus is really providing true value to the CMO, CFO, CEO relationship, being able to showcase that. And obviously, when the problems we're going to talk about in a minute that get experienced or pushed forward because of cookie deprecation definitely impacts the value that the CMO is able to provide.
Yeah, and Tombras, both of these companies have really interesting approach to this sort of business problem. But so we were lucky enough to have Conrad from Quantcast, talk about, sort of give us an overview, sort of the future to come, and I think that was a very helpful setup for us, actually. So Melinda, let's start with you. Broadly speaking, you mentioned sort of the if you will, the evolution of what Distillery does, but tell us a little bit about how you're thinking about it, both as a company and also you as the chief data scientist.
Yeah, sure. So cookie deprecation has begun, right? Cookies for a long time have been one of the main ways that people targeted ads because that third-party cookie is the way that you can tie user information to that impression and make that decision. So as cookies go away, I think one of the main approaches that a lot of advertisers and data providers are taking is to figure out how else can I bring that user data back into that decision, whether it's trying to get the user to log on to a new type of ID or figure out, somehow infer something about who that user is. At Distillery, we took a different approach, which is, what if we didn't have data about the user, didn't try and get data about the user? How good of a job could we do at that targeting without user data? And it turns out that you don't need user data to do effective targeting. You don't need user data to do effective targeting. And I think to people who are really steeped in this industry, that's a bit surprising.
I think we should just reiterate, how sort of potentially radical that idea is, right?
You don't need user data
to do
effective targeting.
Said it again.
And the reason why you don't need user data to do effective targeting is because with today's AI, the AI can learn so much about the inventory itself that it can do that effective targeting, make that decision without any user data, so that you actually don't need user data to do effective targeting.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Alex, what about you?
Yeah, I actually think that kind of goes into the fact that this isn't necessarily an addressability problem, right? You can still reach the exact same consumers you were reaching before. It's really an identity problem, right?
Totally.
That expands outside of targeting, and you start talking about measurement, right? Mm-hmm. And the fact that one-to-one is going away, right? Real, true personalization, customization on a one-to-one perspective has been going away and is going away, and it's not just across the open internet, right? And God, if Jeff Green had a quarter for every time someone said that, their market cap would be double. But it also goes into Google, Meta, pretty much everywhere in the digital ecosystem. And our approach from an agency side is, how do we continue to support and showcase the value that our CMO and the marketing departments are bringing to their companies, so they can put that in front of the board and showcase their profit center versus cost center, while at the same time being able to train and teach our clients that at the end of the day, it's not about one-to-one anymore, right? And models, we talked about it backstage, but I was talking to someone a couple weeks ago, and they were like, oh, this is a really big shift because cookies have been around since 1994, right? And attribution and targeting. Well, advertising's been around since 1941. So
Yeah.
we were able to do 50 some odd years of showcasing the impact that media is having on businesses without having to do one-to-one targeting. And I think like cookies and identity has kind of led to a lot of bad habits, right? And I think this is a great time for us as an industry and as brands to reset, make sure those habits are in a better place and make sure we're working in a direction that isn't about showcasing if that individual customer went and converted in our store or online, but more about the fact that, hey, did all of the dollars we spent impact enough people to drive our business forward?
Yeah. So there's a really interesting sort of layer here of the, the impact and the outcome and the things that you can show. But I'm going to go a little off piste here, just to ask you, how in your respective businesses do you deal with almost the psychological hurdle that it will, that because some people, it's crazy to think about talking about the internet and talk about legacy thinking, but there is definitely legacy thinking, and we talked about the notion of last touch attribution and sort of getting people out of that mindset. But tell me a little bit about sort of the psychological aspect of getting people to surmount their assumptions and what they are comfortable with, getting them comfortable with the discomfort.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to actually refer to something, Alex, you just said outside, which is these things are going to change, and it's okay. And that part of it, and it's okay, I think is really hard. I think that the thing, like you were just saying, your advertising can still work even if you don't know exactly who it reached. And we get distracted by, I think a lot of us got brought to digital media in the first place because of this allure of you're going to be able to measure every single impression. And we got so into it's so satisfying, right, to measure every single impression. And we got so into that, we forgot that that's not actually the brand's goal. Like, to know exactly which impression drove which value is not the brand's goal. The brand's goal is to drive value for the brand. And so we need to focus on that. And I think psychologically, I think that's the thing that helps. Like, focus on your actual goals, focus on driving value for the brand. These things that we're doing today are not always going to be the things that drive that, and that's okay, to your point.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the industry, we've also gotten to the point of trackability is more important than like actual measurement. Any client who has a campaign focused on clicks or on-site visits or things that don't actually directly correlate with actual business outcomes. But because of the fact that those are trackable and incremental business outcomes on a daily perspective aren't, we kind of have this interesting paradigm where, hey, we're going to focus on something to showcase impact, even if that thing isn't actually driving impact. Right? I think it was Meta, when they moved away from store visit measurement, they had an amazing case study they released, which really got no publicity. But it was all about the fact that measuring store visits and optimizing for store visits has no correlation on incremental retail revenue, right, across all of their brands. And it kind of goes to show that, like, we've gotten to the point, because we were able to track so much and we were able to identify so many consumers, that we weren't seeing past the identity point and the last moment of trackability to actually understand how to drive business forward. And that's really what we're all here for, right, is to drive our brands, our clients' businesses forward.
So speaking of which, and that Meta, I seem to remember that. That's pretty spicy piece of research. But you also have a very spicy take on your agency, which is to say that you have this very bold goal to become the first cookieless agency. So tell us about how you think that will happen, and how far along you are in making progress against that.
Well, it sounds cool, so it was easy to get our president on board. But I think all in all, like where we try to live as an agency and where we see a lot of our brands pushing us is they expect us to be a consultancy. Like, that's kind of what all brands are looking for in their partners. And at the same time, like, what we've seen lacking in the industry, from not just an advertising perspective, but a marketing perspective, is kind of the intelligence piece, right? Data has been so abundant over the past 20 years. I mean, more and more up until the last 5 years. But the actual intelligence that's garnered from that data has been actually pretty minuscule, right? And as cookies start to deprecate, what it's allowed us to do is understand that, like, modeling and the ability to take into account all of these signals, all of these different data sets to get a better understanding of identity, and that doesn't just drive value from a outcomes perspective, that drives value from a consumer insights, business insights, competitive insights perspective. That's kind of where we're trying to live. And the ability to move away from cookies allows us to focus more on the consolidation of a bunch of different data sets, including IDs, including model data, including cohorts, right? That allows us a much more deeper insight into what we're trying to do and provide that to the marketing departments, because at the end of the day, advertising is impacting one piece of the business, but being able to supply data to support the other marketing functions. And by the way, even the finance functions, right? If you start to get a better understanding of using a bunch of different data sets of a consumer and how they impact the business from LTV, CLV, EBITDA perspective, like you start to really be able to maximize all the impact there. And then also, as we move away from cookies, obviously it kind of handcuffs our clients to focus more on their first-party data integrations, and really being able to kind of push them in the right direction, or sometimes force them in the right direction, is something that we've seen a lot of success with, because at the end of the day, I think once you're able to show the negative value or the value that cookies are taking away, it forces brands to actually showcase or to move forward with being able to kind of future-proof themselves. And I think like the value thing is kind of where we're missing in the industry from a cookieless perspective. Like there's a lot of tech out there, and I think we'll walk through it in a second. But being able to, like, it's great to say like, hey, UID, ramp ID, we have this piece of tech or this piece of tech that'll make you cookieless. But if you're unable to show the true value that that is going to have for the business, or that the deprecation of cookies will have on the business, I think that's where it becomes really hard for CMOs to go to their CTO, and we talked about it backstage, and be like, hey, I need dev resources, I need X resources for this, this, and that. Okay, well, let's talk about it. That's going to take man hours. That goes to the CFO. Okay, well, what is this going to drive for our business? Oh, we have no idea. Right, and that's the really hard discussion that we're trying to avoid.
Yeah, I mean, just to zoom out a little bit, it's almost like, is the big idea here, you're not just going to know the sort of mechanics of their behavior, but actually learn much more about the actual, human being, right? Or from identity.
Or groupings of human beings.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
It kind of goes away from one-to-one, and like, we like to pretend we're all very unique, right? Yeah. But at the end of the day, we're not. Yeah. And so I think that
my browsing history is so basic. It's it's
exactly.
It's so lame.
Yep. I get 55-year-old female ads on my Hulu all the time. Says a lot about me, but I think that goes to show the fact that like it's not about understanding who you are, it's about understanding who they are from a grouping perspective.
Yeah, thanks. All right, so you recently ran a campaign with that you learned some really interesting things, so I want to make sure that you tell the audience about how that worked.
Oh yeah. So let's show this. And I wonder where I point this. There we go. So this was something that we did using Distillery's ID-free targeting. And so ID-free, it works by learning what the websites mean based on how they're used. So we're looking at opt-in panel data collected outside the digital ecosystem, so we can look at website behaviors. And then the AI, from looking at how those websites are visited in real life, can learn everything about that website, what it means to visit, what's the intent, and where does it fit in someone's journey when they visit that website, so that later when we see that website separate from a user's data, we can make a good decision, understand the value of that impression to the specific brand. So this is what we did along with Tombras, and we ran 3 different versions to compare. We ran Distillery's state-of-the-art ID-based, cookie-based targeting, compared it to ID-free targeting. We use something we call predictive bidding. Still up there. We use something we call predictive bidding, where we execute that targeting intelligence through the bid price. So we pay for every impression exactly what it's worth according to the algorithm. And we also compared that. And so we did one version of that where we ran it just on traffic with cookies for that one-to-one measurement that everybody loves, and another version where we ran it on all inventory and measured it, used modeled measurement to see the results. And what we saw was using ID-free, so targeting without user information, improved the CPA by 20%, so cost per acquisition, so lower is better. So we had a 20% better CPA without user data using ID-free, and then when we ran that on the whole internet, it turned into a 60% improvement in CPA, so we're actually looking at 2.5 times more conversions for every dollar spent. So not only do you not need that user data to effectively target the ad, but you can actually do a much better job when you sort of expand your scope and stop chasing all of that one-to-one stuff and actually just do what makes sense for the brand in terms of their large-scale business goals.
Yeah, I also thought, like, my most interesting finding of the entire thing actually had nothing to do with the CPA. It was the discrepancies in CPM.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
There's so much, what we found is there's so much inventory out there that no one's bidding on, right? Like we were, I mean, I think it was like up to 88% more efficient from a CPM perspective. And if it's on the next slide and that number's wrong, I apologize. But I think that's the most interesting thing is like in terms of how the industry is valuing inventory out there, they're really only valuing ID-based inventory, right? I mean, we saw inventories from some of the most premium publishers that we were getting at 30, 40, 50% lower CPM, assuming, depending on the floor rates, than we were from ID-based, right? And that kind of taught us two things. First off is there's a lot of available inventory out there, but most likely also like there's been a lot of overinvestment from an ad tech perspective in ID-based solutions for targeting, right? They're really, really freaking expensive, right? You're paying $1, $1.50, sometimes $2 CPM to overlay it on top of display inventory, CTV inventory, streaming audio inventory, and then all of a sudden what we found is, oh, you're not just saving because the inventory is cheaper because no one's bidding on it, you're saving from the identity costs. And I think that's the most interesting thing is like, as we kind of go to this next evolution of kind of identity, when cookies fully deprecate, I think it's going to be very eye-opening to see the ad tech and the MarTech identity companies that are focused more on how do we showcase value for the overarching consumer with profitability maybe becoming a 1B versus the current paradigm, which is definitely 1A is profitability. So.
Yeah, it's like the sort of the tension between efficiency and effectiveness, right? That we've heard a lot about today.
And I mean, this is huge because if you think about like already today, we're paying a huge premium to reach the inventory with IDs. Like that ID, it costs so much, that huge premium. Already today, it's not paying for itself, right? You could be doing 2.5 times better by using all of that scale that's available.
Well, you also don't know if those
cheaper.
people are. You also don't know if it's actually more effective, right? Because measurement is depreciating on the other side, right?
Yeah.
So it's like it's interesting.
Oh, you mean when you expand to the whole internet, you don't get your one-to-one measurement?
Even more from like a ID perspective, right?
Yeah.
You're paying more for ID based, and like as we continue to go, it's going to become more and more uncertain whether that's actually driving effectiveness or not, right? That premium that you're paying.
Absolutely, yeah. And as this transitions, it's going to be more extreme, right? There's going to be even fewer IDs at an even higher premium, and so like at a certain point, you have to ask, what am I chasing here, and is it worth it, and should I expand the scope?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so you've talked a little bit about the AI part of this. Any other sort of dimensions of how that part of the technology stack ultimately can sort of make this faster, better, bigger, stronger?
Yeah, I mean, it really relies on kind of this latest generation of AI. I mean, I think people expect there's going to be an AI solution to cookie deprecation, but they're maybe not used to thinking that it's going to be actually one of the most privacy-friendly approaches to cookies to targeting that you can do because it's focused on the inventory, not the user. And it really is based on the fact that you might have heard that ChatGPT learns by predicting the next sentence the next word in a sentence. And so when you think back to those journeys I showed, ID-free is learning by predicting the next website in a journey. And so it's able to go through that same process, this pre-training step, which is the P in GPT, to ahead of time build this huge base of understanding of what every single website means that then it can bring to that targeting decision when it's time to run the campaign. If it wasn't for that, this whole cookie deprecation thing, I wouldn't have a good solution to it. So it's really the fact that there's this latest generation of AI that's able to power that type of understanding that we don't need to use the user information.
That's fascinating. I mean, I think the notion of this sort of, I'm not sure exactly how to describe it, but the sort of the ID-free, the cookie, like this, it is a little frightening to me, frankly, just because of the nebulousness of it. But what you're describing seemingly is this is using AI and other tools to really sharpen it, right? And how long do you think it'll take for the industry as a whole to sort of embrace this sort of new paradigm?
I mean, I would say there's a clock ticking right now, so
Yeah.
hopefully it doesn't take too long. I think in the second half of the year, some people are going to start looking harder for new solutions when they start to see what happens to their campaigns that they're running.
It's all value-based, right? As
Yeah.
soon as like your positive value starts to decline from a marketing perspective, advertising perspective, that's when you're going to really go
Yeah.
head deep, unless you're really proactive about it and you're trying to prove out the positive value it's going to have now,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's going to be the very interesting thing about brands a year, 2 years down the road is it will be very clear the brands that were trying to showcase value 6 months ago, a year ago, versus brands that are trying to save themselves from the value depreciation 6 months, a year from now.
Yeah. All right. So because this event is called Outlook 2024, I'd like your hottest take, or even moderately fiery, on what happened this year. Did you get to 100%? Did you 50? Like, or did massive parts of the ecosystem just completely crater? Melinda.
You mean looking ahead?
Looking ahead, next 12 months.
Yeah, so I think there's going to be a point in the next 12 months where people who haven't proactively solved this problem are going to be chasing their same KPIs, and all those KPIs are going to go off the rail. I mean, everything's changing, the prices are changing, scale is changing, and if you're just focusing on those KPIs and not the larger business goals, your KPIs are going to go off the rail, and hopefully is going to be the moment where those brands wake up and look at their business goals and make those decisions to get that back on the rails.
Awesome.
I think attribution is going to be dead probably by the end of this year, if not earlier. And it's been dying for a while,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
Facebook, Meta, and Google have been using modeled attribution for 4 or 5 years now, right?
Right.
So I think that it's all about like the fact that that's okay.
Yeah.
Like again, I think attribution has probably been one of the worst habits that we've developed
Right.
over the past 30 years, and I think that as we continue to move forward, it's going to be really, really scary for a lot of brands that have focused on attribution being their source of truth.
Yeah.
But I think it really will open up brands' eyes to the ability to actually not just understand business impact historically from measurement,
Yeah.
but also to be able to forecast impact. And I think like that's going to be one of the great paradigms or great shifts is, as we were talking about AI earlier, the predictive, the ability to use AI to take into account historical measurement, whether that's MMM, any type of incremental lift testing, and actually use that to forecast business outputs from future recommendations. And I think that's going to be one of the best parts of 2024 is as we shift towards that, companies are going to have a lot better control and understanding of future business success or future business failure, and I think it's going to really help.
That's great. Yeah, my hot take is there's going to be a completely new glossary of completely ununderstandable acronyms, because this industry can't live without them. I think we have a couple takeaways. Is that right? Should we? Yes. So I think this is from that new AI-based cookieless technology not only navigates the evolving privacy landscape without IDs, but also significantly improves campaign results. I'm going to also say that in future iterations of this conference and others, we'll have a GPT to listen to the conversation, transcribe it, and then give us even more takeaways. But I think that's a good place to start. Thank you, Melinda. Thank you, Alex. It's been really educational for me. And we didn't take questions, but I hope you'll find them, because that's why you're here, to network and get to know people that you didn't know before. So thank you very much, Melinda. Thank you, Alex. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And your intelligence. Thanks.